Hello all, and welcome back to WiscoTrains. My name is Gabe, and we are here in Goshen Grove, Indiana, about to watch the northbound freight depart the Indiana Northern's Goshen Grove yard. The Indiana Northern is part of the Michigan, Indiana, and Northern Rail Corporation short line conglomerate. The first lead locomotive is a patched out XBN GP35, and the second unit is a GP9, lettered for the Hoosier and Southern Railroad, one of the Indiana Northern Railroad's sister lines. We catch it again going over Goshen Creek, headed north, ready to switch all the industries until it reaches the end of the line. Okay, so for those of you worried, no, I did not change the theme of the layout. I just put some old equipment on the layout, some of my DC stuff from the last layouts I built, and talk about something, and it's kind of about freelanced railroads and ideas. So I'm going to start actually with where this whole idea came from, and that is this well-worn issue of Great Model Railroads 2008. And in it, there's a model railroad that has stuck with me for years, and it is Tom Johnson's Logansport and Indiana Northern Railway. It is, I don't know what it is about the layout. I think possibly, I was, 12 at the time, probably a little younger, 11, 12 years old. And I saw in Great Model Railroads something modeling what I wanted to model. And that was a short line railroad in the modern era. A vast majority, especially at the time, maybe not so much now, of what I saw in Model Railroader was, transition era stuff. But I was a young kid that wanted to model things that I saw in real life, just like I'm sure that's why a lot of transition era guys model transition era. It's because that's what they saw when they were kids, and it kind of reminded them of that. I love the shelf design. I think even the Green Bay and Western, even though it is self-standing, has a lot of that shelf to it where it's only a foot deep in most areas. But I loved it so much that I wanted to do something similar. And part of what I liked is that Tom Johnson, not just his modeling is great, and it's even gotten better, like shockingly better, even from what it looked like in 2008, is he had a short line conglomerate, and he had some other railroads that were part of it, kind of like the Genesee in Wyoming, but on a much smaller scale. So I decided I had a big interest in Minnesota railroads. Even though I grew up in Michigan, I had a big interest in Minnesota railroads, because I had a book about the Chicago Northwestern's Alco line, and I liked all the grain elevators and stuff like that, and Tom Johnson's Logansport and Indiana Northern also was part of that inspiration, I think, of liking grain elevators and covered hoppers and all that stuff, because that's all he modeled. I think there might be one or two other industries on his entirety of that layout, but essentially, I think even in that article he mentions that all he has is covered hoppers and a boxcar and a tank car or two. So I started what I called INRail. IN, Indiana Northern Rail, INRail, MinRail, the Minnesota Rail Corporation. And this is Walther's GP15 that now my son is using and abusing. As you can tell, there's paint chipped off, but whatever. It's an old locomotive. It's still working good, and he's having fun, so I'm not that worried. But anyways, I had the Lake Forest Central, and it was MinRail, the Minnesota Railway Corporation. And I had a 4x8 that was like this, and I also had a small layout in my dorm that didn't get too far my sophomore year of college. You do dumb stuff when we're kids and younger, but yeah, so MinRail kind of stuck with me, and as after graduating college and working and living in apartments and stuff, I kind of came up with a variation of that, and I went back to the roots of Indiana, because that's what I actually really wanted to model, and I was kind of worried about horning in on Tom Johnson's territory of the Indiana Northern, or the Logansport and Indiana Northern. So I created the Michigan, Indiana, and Northern, same initials as MinRail, M-I-N, Michigan, Indiana Northern Railroad, Rail Corporation, and created 3 separate railroads. So these are heralds I actually had made up, custom-made heralds that I had made up for my fictional short line. The 3 were, so I had 4 heralds made up. One was just a plain generic Michigan, Indiana Northern Corporation herald, and then I had Indiana Northern, I had Custer County Railway, and Hoosier and Southern. All kind of were supposed to have different themes. The Indiana Northern was supposed to be the longer distance, kind of more pretty rural, but it was going to be longer distance and kind of a little bit of a bridge route, have a little bit of bridge traffic, not a lot. And maybe I was thinking maybe it would have like a coal-fired power plant on it if I ever got my dreams one day. The Hoosier and Southern was just a little short line that dead-ended somewhere, so it went to one town, came back. And then the Custer County Railway was supposed to be a railroad up in southern Michigan that was supposed to be heavy industry, have a lot of industries that it could switch and stuff. So why am I telling you all this? Well, it kind of has to do a lot with that I didn't want to horn in Tom Johnson's territory, which I thought Indiana Northern, the Indiana small short line theme, you know, I mean, honestly, I wanted to steal the idea, which is why we're kind of here. And I liked it. I really thought it was a really cool idea. The logo he had and just everything. But anyways, recently I was listening to Train Talk Media. They recently interviewed Tom Johnson, and by recent I mean March 31st, I think is when it came out. So go check out Train Talk Media here on YouTube after you watch this video, and just check out some of their stuff. It's more of a podcast format, but if you're like me and you like having something to listen to while you're working on the railroad, great thing to listen to, because there's cool pictures and stuff, but you don't actually have to be watching it. Anyways, he was asked about why he now models the Cass County Railway, a different one, and how he changed to it and his thoughts on that. And what he said is that he had given away some locomotives or sold some locomotives. He wasn't too clear on which one it was, but he started seeing them on other layouts, and he started seeing them do things that he didn't want to see done with his INRail or Logansport Indiana Northern Railway theme. And I'll quote him here. It says, "It sort of got carried away. People were modeling things I didn't want to see on the Logansport Indiana Northern. I just decided it was time to change." And he said that now, like, he's okay with the Cass County Railway that he's modeling now, a fictional one again, another freelance railroad. He's okay with people having the freight cars and stuff from it. But honestly, when I listened to it, he kind of sounded a little sad. And I felt kind of bad for the guy. I was like, so that kind of got me to thinking, like, well, it's a freelance railroad. He came up with the idea, and I think he had some operating model railroad friends that also had the other short lines, so he didn't have it completely, and it sounded like he was more talking about the Logansport and Indiana Northern as opposed to those other railroads. And he sounded like he was betrayed, like it was his creation, and other people were doing things with it that he didn't want done. So that got me to thinking, like, well, I don't know, if I come up with a fictional model railway, a freelance model railway, is it okay if somebody else steals that idea? So, like, let's go with the Green Bay and Western, the modern Green Bay and Western, which, I'll be 100% honest, the Green Bay and Western, I don't see too many people modeling it online. There's one other YouTube channel I know about, and I'll link to that down below if I can find it. I don't think he's posted in a while, or I would probably remember the name. But nobody's doing what I'm doing, to my knowledge. You know, a modern Green Bay and Western. I do remember there being a picture somewhere on Facebook or something like that where there was a modern GE locomotive with Green Bay and Western colors. And I'll be 100% honest, when I came up with this idea back in 2021, 2020, somewhere around there. I don't know when I saw that picture, if that was kind of part of the inspiration or not, but nobody's doing this. So and it's a little different because I'm modeling a real railroad. Like, the Green Bay and Western is not mine. I didn't come up with the idea. I am coming up with the modern version of it. And I'll be honest, I have other ideas that go along with it that maybe I would expand one day, where the Fox River Valley Railroad still exists, and then maybe rails to the north towards like Escanaba and Marquette are part of it as like a 3 railroad regional conglomerate all meeting in Green Bay, and I would call it New Rail because it's Northeast Wisconsin Rail. Anyways, those are like, I'm bored sitting in my armchair and I want, you know, I'm thinking about things type stuff. So nothing about the railroad itself. But getting back on topic, I thought about it, like, Alan McClellan way back in the day had the Virginia and Ohio, and to my knowledge, a lot of other people modeled the Virginia and Ohio, and he, to my understanding, kind of embraced it, didn't have an issue with it. I mean, you could buy decals, and you could buy decals when he was still alive, so that you could letter your locomotives in the same way. So this is kind of the question I have. Is it okay if I wanted to tomorrow to letter a locomotive in Logansport and Indiana Northern colors, and you know, using the distinct decals he has, which, you know, they aren't super cool, but they're the state shape of Indiana with the L and IN in it, and the Indiana Northern INRail, and the same colors and whatnot. Like, is that okay? I guess I've never really thought about it. It'd be one thing, part of me goes, well, you know, there's always jealousy, somebody doing something better than you can, but I don't know if you've seen Tom Johnson's modeling. It's amazing, and I don't think anybody that I know of is doing anything better than he ever did. Or has done, or is doing. There's no way the people who are stealing his ideas are as creative as him when it comes to modeling scenery. There's no way. I just don't believe it, even though I haven't seen these examples. So after thinking about this for, well, now a couple weeks since I've watched that video, there's a couple ways to look at this. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but it's also annoying. Who wants to be imitated constantly, or in some ways mocked? And I don't think people were mocking him. I guess I don't know. And none of this is to say, like, I don't agree with Tom Johnson. Like, at a certain point, if I designed the heralds and I didn't want other people to use them, I understand that. I mean, selling the locomotives, I think he kind of understands is that's on him. And, you know, it's not like people are totally stealing the ideas, but they're just buying his locomotives and his work, his artwork. Yeah, does the artist get a say on how it's displayed then? I don't know, it's a very hard one. Part of me really thinks that I would be flattered if somebody started modeling the modern Green Bay and West. I don't really have a right to be upset about it because, I mean, again, the Green Bay and Western logos and heralds and paint scheme is not mine. There were times where I just thought, dang, maybe I should just steal Tom Johnson's paint scheme for the Logansport and Indiana Northern and model what I want to model, and maybe even have some like through freights and more of a regional theme. And I'm glad I didn't. I think back in the day I kind of felt like I shouldn't, and I think I'm going to stay with that gut feeling of I probably shouldn't, unless the person who came up with the idea, especially if they designed the idea, like the Logansport and Indiana Northern and the logos and stuff like that, then I kind of think there is a certain amount of like respect. You probably shouldn't be reproducing those items. However, again, there's nothing stopping you. I really would love to hear everybody's idea, and that was kind of part of this video. You know, I've been saying I want to do more model railroad editorial stuff. This is it. So I would love to know everybody's opinion. I'll do one of those YouTube poll things, see what people seem to think about this, and that's kind of my thoughts on it. Is personally, I don't think I should do that, but I get why people do. It's because they think your stuff is so cool. You know, Tom Johnson's a great modeler, and by modeling the Logansport and Indiana Northern, maybe you can get some of that greatness and be as good as him. Whether or not the person, you know, in Tom's case, he doesn't seem to be very happy about it. But I guess I'll say this. This is how I'll end it, and kind of my final opinion on it. Tom sold the locomotives, gave away the locomotives, however that happened. He sold the artwork. He gave away the artwork. The person who owns it can display it however they want. However, doesn't mean you get to reproduce the artwork. The modern Green Bay and Western, go bananas, you can do it. I'd be a little flattered that you think my modeling is so good that you're going to model the same thing as me. And I also have zero stake in the Green Bay and Western. I can't stop you from doing it even if I wanted to. So that's kind of my thought. You can display the artist's work however you want, but it doesn't mean you get to just copy the artist's work constantly. And I think it does. There's a little bit of, well, they're not making money off of it. I get that. I don't know, respecting other things. Let me know. Tell me down in the comments. That's all I got for this. I've said more than enough. Probably bored you all. You all have left. It'd be what it is. I'll see you in the next one, especially if you subscribe to the channel. That's the way to see more of these videos like this and more about the modern Green Bay and Western. So have a great rest of your day. See you next time. Bye.